Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first, and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage, and desireth conditions of peace.
We discussed in detail the progress in the implementation of agreements that we signed in 2021, and how the 28 sectoral programs are being implemented. And we noted that these 28 programs is nothing but a continuation of our bilateral cooperation and integration that we agreed earlier. We also noted that our ministries and agencies are working productively in every field of integration. The high-level group for coordinating integration is working well and will meet again, has already met in November. Close contacts are maintained by the governments. The prime ministers met 8 times last year. They are regularly in contact, almost weekly. Mr. Lukashenko and I are personally monitoring the implementation of agreements to do with integration. We could identify a number of integration fields where we have had real progress. Transport and logistics. The transit of many categories of Belarusian goods to third countries through Russia has increased notably, and we're working towards integrating our carriers. We also are working to mitigate the illegitimate sanctions taken against our countries, aimed at making the economic situation more difficult in our countries. We're also working in fields like integrating the payment systems to create a single payment space, integrating the customs and employment law, join up the gas and the energy markets. All our joint efforts to implement the Union State agenda economically is aimed at securing growth and increase the living standards of our citizens. Our other large-scale integration projects are also facing great prospects. The Eurasian Economic Union, and to create a single employment market. All Eurasian Union countries are receiving great benefits from these integration processes. At today's talks, we also discussed strengthening our joint defense space of Russia and Belarus. We agreed again to take collective measures to strengthen security of our countries in the face of the growing military activity of NATO countries on the borders of our Union state, near the borders. We also focused on in this context, focused on the exercises called Allied Resolve, which will continue until the 20th of February in Belarus. I should say that these exercises are totally defensive in nature and do not threaten anyone. The defense ministries of both countries notified everybody about these planned maneuvers well in advance. And during these exercises, as I informed Mr. Lukashenko, many military attaches from the foreign countries were invited and visited and could see for themselves. At President Lukashenko's request, I shared the content of my recent contacts with the foreign leaders, devoted to the topic of providing long-term and legally binding security guarantees to Russia. And I believe that, understandably, this concerns our Belarusian allies. We discussed the situation concerning progress of Russia's demands to the West. The main watch of win is the non-expansion of NATO giving up strike weapons, deployment of strike weapons near Russian borders, and returning to the pre-1997 position when the NATO-Russia Founding Act was signed. Unfortunately, the members of the alliance are not prepared to accept our initiatives. At the same time, we formulated ideas on military transparency. They formulated ideas on military transparency, which we are not against, and we are prepared to follow the negotiating track as long as all issues are considered together and not giving up those that are our priority. Mr. Lukashenko and I discussed the problem around the intra-Ukrainian conflict. The implementation of the Minsk agreements is delayed again, despite our joint efforts and contacts with the Normandy Forum and our consultation with partners. Kiev is not implementing the Minsk agreements and is categorically against having direct dialogue with the leadership of Donbass and Luhansk, and is subverting the commitments to provide Donbass with special status and the amnesty, which are key to the agreements. Human rights are systematically violated in Ukraine. The discrimination of Russian population is proceeding at the legislative level. Efforts to reduce tension depend on the implementation of the Minsk agreements. All Kiev has to do is sit down at the table with the representatives of Donbass and agree political and humanitarian means to settle the conflict, and the sooner the better. Unfortunately, right now, we are observing the contrary, an escalation of the situation in Donbass. In conclusion, I would like to express my thanks to Mr. Lukashenko for our constructive work together, and I am certain that our talks today will serve the strengthening of our bilateral relations. And tomorrow, as we agreed, we will attend the planned event concerning our joint military activity. Dear friends, our meeting today with Mr. Putin is taking place in the context of an unprecedented escalation of military tension around the world, as the President said. Given the acute nature of the situation, we spoke a lot about this issue and discussed our possible joint actions in response to the aggression of Western partners. I want to say again, nobody wants not just war, but any escalation of any conflict. We don't need that. Neither Russians nor Belarusians need it. Those informed about these issues will know that even our neighbors, including Ukraine, are not the key players here. The key players, you know who they are. For the first time in decades, we are on the brink of a conflict, unfortunately, that may suck in the whole continent into the sinkhole. We can see the irresponsible and even the lack of intelligence on the part of certain narrow-mindedness of certain politicians and the unreasonable conduct of the leaders of our neighboring countries, their painful decision to walk on the brink, on the edge. Mr. Putin spoke about the deplorable situation in Donbass. People are ready to flee, and as we know, they are already fleeing. That is not normal. I have the impression that certain people vested with huge responsibilities, the politicians of the so-called free world, are pathologically dangerous to those around them, including their own people. Just in the next few days, the joint drill, Allied Resolve of Russia and Belarus, will finish. Tomorrow, Mr. Putin and I will attend a joint exercise in the Russian Federation, which the media will be informed about. And as regards the exercise completing, and the President has already mentioned it, in the face of the growing military danger on our borders and the pumping of Ukraine with weapons, Belarus and Russia are forced to find adequate means of fighting off the aggressor on our southern borders, as far as Belarus is concerned. And there is no surprise that we are watching this over 1,000 kilometers of the southern border, and we're looking for points where we would have to conduct our defense. The Russian Federation and I have a joint defense system and joint army, joint training centers, and the military doctrine of the Union State. All these documents and plans have never been hidden. Mr. Putin was very open about it, and everybody knows. So the exercise is our joint decision that is based on the situation at hand. It is very transparent, it's on our land, and we do not hide this from anyone. It is happening under the watchful eye of the entire army of military attaches and the press. Of course, we also discussed the integration of the Union State. It has been 4.5 months since the decree of on the Union State was signed, which enshrined the main agreements to build the Union State for 2022-23, including the 28 Union programs. We are about 30% ahead along the path of these programs. What has been done, what the progress is, has already been commented on a lot, and the President has mentioned this too. At the moment, we're paying particular attention on the following areas: customs, tax, and the joint gas market. Even more, those pursuing sanctions will suffer from them, will be the first to suffer. This gangster attempt to impose an economic war against us is going to cost us, of course. We have already learned to stand against the sanctions, and the trade turnover is between us is proof of that, but we have to spend a lot of resources on countering the sanctions pressure, and we talked a lot about it. And I appreciate Mr. President's orders that you have given to the leadership of the Russian Federation in my presence. I'm very grateful to you for that. But the fact that we Belarusians and Russians will emerge from this hybrid war successfully, that is clear. Our cooperation in the economy has strengthened, and bilateral trade has seen many new product lines. And the way our external trade is diversifying, the world is large. You can't lock up every door and every transport route. Another area we discussed was the economy, and it is pleasing that we worked well last year despite various pandemics and viruses. We grew our trade turnover to almost 40 billion, and that's something we can count. There is no border here, and these are billions of dollars, and both economies grew, both in GDP and in industrial output, and in many other areas of the real sector of the economy. Of course, we all talked more about problems than successes. They are getting fewer, but they still remain. We discussed support measures for the economy, strengthening financial stability, increasing business and cooperation. Of course, I informed the President of Russia how Belarus is preparing for the important political event, the constitutional referendum, and we shall hold it in dignity in the interests of the Belarusian people, and it will not be counter to our relationship with our brotherly Russia. The West, using the hands of our enemies, is trying to rock the boat in Belarus. However, nobody is having any delusions about repeating the August of 2020. This is important. This is strengthening our confidence that together we will overcome any situation and any challenge and build our common future. And nobody should expect that we will somehow shiver in the face of problems. I will repeat, we don't want a war. But if somebody can't wait to have one, our response will be asymmetrical. I think everybody in the world understands that. And by defending the security of our nations and our states, we shall act appropriately. Mr. Putin said, and I agree with him, they're trying to cast a wedge between us. Not only just us two, but also any other countries that are trying to unite. Kazakhstan is proof of that, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much.